I'm sure a number of you are all familiar with Larry's work, obviously, and that's why we're here. But here are some of the highlights that I know of. And Larry started his career as a stand-up in New York, and then he landed a job as a writer and performer on Fridays, a variety show of some note back in the early 80s.
A very little note.
Little note, yeah. Yes, where we met about 20 years ago. And then he went back to New York to do some more stand-up and landed a job on Saturday Night Live, and then left Saturday Night Live, is that right? And
I think wasn't invited back.
Yeah.
Is probably more appropriate.
And then continued to stand up where he connected with, or reconnected with, Jerry Seinfeld, whom he's known since, when did you meet?
76.
76. And then went on to co-create and be the guiding force, the writer extraordinaire, the creative force behind Seinfeld. And I'll mention some of my favorite episodes. I'm sure you have some of yours. The contest, the mango, the puffy shirt, the Chinese restaurant.
I didn't write any of those.
The parking space, the pilot. I can go on and on and on. And the final episode, just to name a few, because he wrote a lot. He's also written and directed his own feature, Sour Grapes. And there we go. And now is returning to stand-up and doing a comedy documentary special currently for HBO. He's the recipient of both an Emmy and 2 WGA awards for writing. Ladies and gentlemen, Larry David. Good. Well, since this is indeed a writing seminar, I thought the first question would be about writing and the process of writing.
Yes, let's talk about the process.
And your process of writing, because I've known that over these years, you've always carried a little pad and pen with you. And when did that start?
Well, that started when I was doing stand-up. You know, what are you going to do? You get an idea. We didn't have answering machines in those days, so you couldn't just excuse yourself and make a phone call and leave the bit on your answering machine. So, you know, you needed to write your ideas down. So I started walking around with a pad, and it came in handy for other things as well, directions, getting women's phone numbers all the time, you know.
Did you?
So, and I still, of course, have that.
You still have it?
Yeah, I still have the pad today. It's on me somewhere.
Show us?
Well, it's a little pad. I just write ideas down.
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah.
What's in it? Oh, let's see. Urologist yells at you for not having been there in 5 years. Jennifer makes Mike wear white T-shirts. You know, things like that.
Things like that, yeah. Did you ever lose that, by the way?
Oh yeah, I lost it. And usually I'll have these ideas and I get lazy about transposing them into notebooks. And I lost one last year, and it was filled up with brilliant ideas. And I don't know what happened. I lost it, and I have to tell you, it was one of the most devastating things that ever happened to me. Not being able to, because you can't get those ideas back. Invariably, what happens is something sparks it. It's a situation that never, ever comes up twice. And I noticed that out of all those ideas that I lost, I never got one of them back. So it was completely devastating because those ideas, you know, they're worth money. In a way, and more than that, that's you know, that's what you're writing about. There's so many things in there that I could have used that I'll never be able to use. So it was really like my house. I lost my house in a fire or something.
It's very sad.
Yeah, it was very sad.
Very sad.
Very sad. But I've recovered.
You
and
have recovered very nicely.
I'm back on the ball.
Do you write with a typewriter, or do you or a computer, or anything like that?
Well, no, I write on. I don't know how to use a computer. I don't even know how to work it. I write in longhand in
Scratch pads.
spiral notebooks like we used to have in high school. Yeah.
And do you save them?
Yeah, I save all the notebooks. I don't know why, because I would be wrecked if anybody ever looked in there, because I have a lot of personal things about how much I hate this person or that person that have nothing to do with what I'm writing. But I'll just go off on a tangent and have to get it out. And so if anybody ever read it, I'd really be in trouble.
Wow. Well, obviously this all started somewhere, and Larry, you were. Let's go back to the beginning, okay? You don't mind, do you?
Sure.
Yeah,
go,
Brooklyn?
Go anywhere you want. Brooklyn, right?
Yeah. Particularly funny family, or?
No, nothing funny about that family. Nothing at all. It was
No.
There was nobody funny in my family.
No one at all.
No one. I never saw. I'm not kidding. I never saw my parents laugh. I never heard my father say anything that my mother laughed at. I never heard my mother say anything that my father laughed at. There just wasn't any laughter at all. Yeah.
Were you a particularly funny kid?
No, not especially.
Not at all.
No, I can never recall making anybody laugh.
Did your parents think you were funny at all?
No, nobody actually thought I was. The first time I ever realized that I might be funny is when I left Brooklyn.
Really?
It took a big trip. It took getting out of Brooklyn, and I went to college. And
you went to the University of Maryland. Why the University of Maryland? Why would one go from Brooklyn to?
Well, believe it or not, I like the name Terrapin. That was the nickname of the school, and I remember watching a football game like in 1959. Maryland Terrapins, that's a nice name, so it stuck with me, and that's where I went. But anyway, so I went to school, and then I met some people, and I started talking, and they started laughing. And I was like shocked. What's going on here? You know.
That was the first impulse.
That was my first inkling that I could be funny. Yeah.
And that was to lead to stand-up, writing, acting.
The first thing it led to, I got a BA and had no idea.
In what?
In history. Yeah, I know you could do a lot with that. Yeah. And so I got the BA, and then I didn't really know what I was going to do, and somehow I took this acting class. I don't know. I was drawn to it somehow.
In college?
No, after college.
After college.
Yeah, because I didn't do anything with theater or comedy at all in college. I was afraid. Well, with acting, I was afraid people would make fun of me, so I didn't. I steered away from it.
You steered away from it.
Yeah.
You went to Manhattan after
Yeah,
college.
right.
And you got in an acting class where?
I got in an acting class, this private class with this guy, Bill Esper.
Sure.
I don't know. They don't care about this. But anyway, and it was some time during that period that I went to the Improv with some friends, and I saw a show, and I thought, yeah, that kind of looks right. And I was so confident that I could do that I approached Bud Friedman that night, and I said, "Oh, I'd like to go on there. I could,
you can do that."
Yeah, I can do that. Yeah, my God, if he had ever put me on that night, it would have been so sad. So then he said, "Well, you got to come back and audition," and eventually I wrote some material, and it's nerve-wracking, but if you do it once, you can do it again. Somehow, it's the first time that's the hardest. If you get up once, you can always get up again. So I got up once, and then I got up again, and finally I got the audition, and I started first at Catch a Rising Star. I started working out at the club, mainly very late, going on at night, and I went through some hellish times doing stand-up comedy.
Such as?
Well, being heckled unmercifully, people just being, you can't not imagine how rude people are until you go to a nightclub.
Yeah.
Because if they don't like you, it's not like in the theater, if you don't like a play, you just sit there and you watch the play, and then when it's over, you leave.
Right.
But, I would hear things like, oh, you're so much funnier than him. And they're sitting right in front of you. They don't care. And they just look at you, they go, that's not funny. Or get off the stage. They don't care. They're insane. And I was like, I couldn't handle it. I didn't have the temperament for it. I was kind of like when McEnroe would play tennis. If a call went against him, he couldn't handle it. And he would start, hey, oh, what you fucking people, you idiots! And I couldn't take it. I didn't have like quippy comebacks and stuff like that. I wasn't like polished. I had no polish. So I would just like totally lose control. And the audience, when I started doing it, they laughed because they thought that I was kidding, but I wasn't.
You were serious.
Yeah.
So you what did you do during the day to earn a living? Any other odd jobs or?
I had some odd jobs at the beginning, but then after a while, you start emceeing at the clubs, and they give you a little money. They start giving you cab fare. You take the little jobs in colleges in New Jersey. There are clubs, and it was all frightening and horrible. But eventually, you're able to sort of eke out a living doing that.
Right.
And that's what I was doing.
And is that the point where you met your neighbor Kramer?
No.
Or that was later?
No, that was around 70. I met him in 77, yeah, when I moved into another building. I used to live on a tenement on 43rd between 8th and 9th, and then I moved to this new high-rise that they were only renting to people in the arts and handicapped and elderly. It was a very strange, it was a very strange mixture. And so then I moved into that building. That's when I met Kramer.
The infamous Kramer, yes.
Like they know him, I don't know.
Oh, I think they do. From there, you moved to Los Angeles. Do you remember your first experience moving to L.A.? Because
I auditioned for Fridays.
Which was a variety show that was
like a Saturday Night Live clone show.
Yeah, in fact, it was.
Yeah, in fact, I remember. I thought Fridays was like a working title. I couldn't imagine calling the show Fridays.
Yes.
And then
audacity.
I got hired as a performer, not a writer. And then all of a sudden, I saw like. They handed out a big loose leaf binder, and the name Fridays was on the binder. And I thought, my God, they're actually calling this thing Fridays?
Yes.
And I walked into the producer's office, and I said, you got a second, and he said, yeah, what is it? I said, well, what is this? You're not going to call this thing Fridays. And he said, yeah, that's the. I said, you can't call it that. I said, are you crazy? I said, we'll get killed. It's just like Saturday Night Live. Fridays, don't you see what you're doing?
Yes.
And he did see, and that's what he wanted. Yeah.
That's right.
I think the sad part about it.
ABC's mandate was that it was supposed to be
a
television version of Saturday Night Live.
Right. Yeah.
Whatever that meant. But that gave you your first opportunity to be on national television and to write sketches and to be in sketches. And did you enjoy that experience?
I didn't particularly enjoy live television. No, I was much too neurotic for that. And
was it scary going on live?
It was scarier for my mother than it was for me because she admitted to me that she was taking 20 milligrams of Valium just to watch me. I mean, that's just watching. Imagine if she had to say something. So.
But you worked on that show for 2 years.
2 years. That lasted until that was from 80 to 82.
And that's where you met Michael Richards.
Michael Richards, right?
And Larry Charles, who wrote on the show also.
Mm-hmm.
And then when the show was over, why did you leave L.A.?
I stayed for another 2 years after the show was over, but I don't know. I didn't really need to be here anymore. I felt like my future was in stand-up comedy. That's what I wanted to do. And
you always go back to that, don't you? Seem to,
Well, when
after every experience.
when I run out of other things, yeah. So I went back, and I just didn't feel right being here. It wasn't like the right match for some reason. I was more, when I go up in front of an audience here, I don't know who the people are, but when I was on in New York, I knew who was from Jersey. I knew who was from out of town. I knew who was from Long Island. I just felt more comfortable. So I moved back to New York, and then I got a job on Saturday Night Live a few months later.
And how was that experience compared to Fridays?
Well, it was much easier because I was just writing, and I was writing sketches, which I really loved to write. I loved writing sketches, and it was, but they never put anything on the air that I wrote. In the whole year that I worked there, I had one sketch on the air the entire season. One sketch, and it was on at 5 to 1 in the morning, and Ed Begley Jr. was in it, and I ran into him a couple of weeks ago, and that's what we talked about, my stupid sketch. I got in tremendous fights with Dick Ebersol, who was the producer of the show, because my material was doing well at the read-through, and then he wouldn't put it on the air, or he would go to dress rehearsal, and then he would cut it. And one thing I did led to actually an episode on Seinfeld when I walked up to him 5 minutes before the show started, and he had his headphones on, and he had his name in the back of the chair and everything. And I walked up to him and I went, "Your show stinks! This show is shit! It's shit! Do you hear what I'm saying? It stinks! I'm out of here! I quit! I fucking quit!" I left 5 minutes before the show. And I started walking home, and it's freezing out, and I can't get a cab, and I'm walking home, and as I'm starting to walk home, I'm starting to think, what the hell did you just do? You stupid idiot? And I'm starting to add up the money now, because I don't have any money, and I'm thinking, how much money did I just lose here? And I'm going, you just cost yourself $60,000, you dumb schmuck. So I'm going home, I'm thinking about it. Well, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? I go into Kramer, we start talking about it, and finally, we come up with the solution that I'll just go back and pretend the whole thing never happened. So on Monday morning, I go back to work. I'm sitting there, they're having their meeting, and the writers are looking at me like, what the hell are you doing here? And I'm trying not to make eye contact with anybody, but I'm just sitting on my chair. Nobody said a word to me, and that was it. And of course, I gave that to George for an episode very early on, like the second season.
That's great. So you left Saturday Night Live after about a year, and then, or one season?
Well, I left. Dick Ebersol left after that year too, and then Lorne Michaels took over, and I didn't really get any phone calls to return to the show.
Return to that show, and you went back to stand-up.
Right, went back to stand-up.
Whereupon one evening you ran into Jerry, and that's the beginning of the Seinfeld.
Right, that was in. Well, we met in 1976, and we always had very stimulating, engaging conversations. We always enjoyed talking to each other. We were never really close friends, but whenever we ran into each other at the clubs, it was always a lot of fun. And we always seemed to talk about things that I never talked about with anybody else. The placement of a button on your shirt, stuff like that, you know.
Yeah.
The stuff that he would do on stage and get laughs with, but not I would never attempt to do. But anyway, so then this one night he told me, because he had started to do Letterman at that point, and he was getting a lot of attention doing talk shows. And he had read a script of mine, screenplay, a couple of years earlier. And at that point, NBC was interested in doing something with him, and he said, do you want to talk about it? And, again, So we went into a grocery store, and we just started talking about some of the products in the store, as we would normally do.
Sure.
And the conversation was very funny, and we were laughing. And I said, "See, this is the show. This is what the show should be." And he said, "What?" And I said, just these two idiots talking about nothing, And that was actually the germ of the whole thing, right in there. And again, when we did that episode of the two of them pitching the idea to NBC, that was sort of what...
fairly authentic.
Yeah, that's where it came from.
So you went and pitched this idea to Castle Rock?
I flew out, we pitched it to Castle Rock, and then we had to pitch it to NBC, which we did. And again, at the pitch meeting was very much like the episode when George said, no, this is not the show. This is not the show.
That's actually what happened.
Yeah, that's because I thought it was going to be like a one-camera show.
Yes.
We didn't picture an audience or anything. We were just going to follow this comedian around, see how he got his material, and that's what we had pitched. And then they started, and we said one camera. They said, no. It can't be one camera. It's got to be 3 cameras. We want a 3-camera show. Oh, no. This is not the show. That's not the show. And I looked at one of the Castle Rock executives who looked at me like I had just landed from Mars or something. But eventually it was changed to a 3-camera show, thank God. Yeah.
Right, but you got an order for 4 shows, which was the lowest order of any
Well, that was after the pilot.
After the pilot.
Yeah, we did a pilot, and then the pilot got picked up for 4 shows.
Yeah, 4.
The lowest order in the history of network television, yeah.
But it was called the Seinfeld Chronicles, right?
At that time, yeah.
And how different was that to the rest of the show?
Well, the show obviously evolved over time, but
Was Elaine on the show?
she wasn't in the pilot. She was added on after the pilot, but we got picked up for the 4 shows, and to tell you the truth, every time we got a pickup, it was always slightly disappointing to me, because I had never written a half hour before. I had 1 pilot in me. I didn't think I could write another show. I didn't even know what the show was, to tell you the truth. To me, the whole thing was luck that I even managed to get 40 pages out. I had no idea what I was doing. And then, so it was picked up for 4 shows, and I'm thinking, my God, how am I going to write 4 shows? And so somehow I managed to get through the 4 shows. And then the 4 shows, so I go back to New York, and I'm forgetting about this thing. I don't even know anything about television. I don't know that you wait around for pickups and things like this. I just forgot about it. I just assumed that we did the 4 shows, and okay, now I'm back in New York.
Back doing stand-up.
Yeah, back doing stand-up. No, I get a phone call. Come out. We're doing 13 shows. And then then oh my God, then it's like the tears started to well up, and the sense of inadequacy, and what am I going to do?
You've got to write 13 shows?
Yes. So I was frightened to death. Yeah.
Going back to the testing on Seinfeld, because I know that in your bathroom you have the testing report, from NBC, which said that the show was too Jewish, that it was too New York, that the characters were weak.
Right.
And you have that
for the
blown up.
For the 100th episode, someone, Glenn Padnick, the Castle Rock, the head of television at Castle Rock, gave me the blown up marketing report, and it's in my bathroom now. And yeah, it's exactly what you said, that they didn't like the characters, they didn't like Jerry, they didn't like the whole concept, and they recommend that you pass on this.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. What is
supporting characters are weak?
That's what is particularly attributed to you is the way you merge and intersect stories, particularly in the second act.
What's going on back there?
Oh, okay. Yeah.
It's over now.
Okay.
Did this evolve?
Yes.
At what point?
Yeah, no,
Do you remember it, how that changed?
Well, yeah, I remember one episode I wrote called The Busboy, that one story this guy Elaine wanted to get rid of from Seattle met the busboy who set this something on fire, and those two met in the hall at the end of the show somehow, and they started fighting, and I kind of liked that, and then I started to kind of consciously work toward that in a way of getting all these stories to intersect. It was kind of fun, and it made it interesting for me, and also
That made the show really distinct.
well, yeah, and also at the beginning, after like the third or fourth season, we needed to take on more writers. It was just too much for me. And so then when new writers would come in and start to pitch ideas, they invariably would pitch an idea for each cast member. So they'd go, okay, this is what I got for Jerry, this is what I got for George, and I go, okay, or you know, go back and fix that, whatever. So it started to become like 4 stories, and then if it was just me doing it, I could somehow get the characters involved with maybe 2 stories or 3 stories. But when the writers were doing it, they felt more comfortable pitching 4 ideas. So that's how that all started. And then because there were so many stories, we needed more sets, and then we started to go outside, and the whole thing started to really expand.
By the third or fourth season.
Around the 4th season, yeah.
Was there a point in the in the development of the show that you realized and you said, "Gee, I think this is what the show is about"? You know, when you see some of these pilots and then you see the evolution of the show, you say, and then you go back and you look at the pilot and you realize, boy, that has nothing to do with the show. Was there something similar to that with?
No, I mean, I could go back and look at the pilot now. I don't like it, but I could see that, yeah, the germ of what we were doing is there. It just that it was much simpler. There was really only one story, and that story was this woman who Jerry had met out of town doing a club. Said she called him up and said that she wanted to stay with him. She was wondering if she could stay with him for 2 days, and it was all about interpreting what that meant. Stay, did that mean, you know, just staying in the same bed or just staying in the apartment? So that was the whole idea. That's what I really thought the show was going to be, just something very simple that we would do for half an hour, one little small thing like that. But there was no way we could have done that. It wouldn't have worked. It would have been too boring.
It would have been,
Yeah.
yeah. Now, how did you staff the show? You also, now you're not only writing the show, and then you're producing the show, and suddenly you have to choose writers to work with you. And how was that process, and did it always change?
Well, the first person I thought of was a very close friend, Larry Charles, who we work with together on Fridays. And so Larry worked there for a couple of seasons, and then I hired some other friends, and then I don't know, just instinct, people would come in, I would just get a feeling about someone. I didn't like reading, I couldn't read any other shows because I hadn't really watched any other shows. So if people would give me a spec script, I didn't really know what it was about. So you just get an instinct for it. I would just make people submit ideas, basically. If in fact you were hired, just give me some ideas of what you think would make a good episode. And that's how I did it. People had an interesting idea. I would thought, oh, they understand the kind of ideas that I like.
And what was your relationship with the actors on the show over the years?
I think it was very good. There were no problems.
Did all of them audition for Seinfeld?
Yes. The hardest part to cast was George. We went through a lot of actors for George. And then we got a tape that was made in New York. Jason was in New York, and he had auditioned with a casting director. So it was just him sitting on a chair with no background, reading from the pilot script. And I saw about 10 seconds of it. Honest to God, I saw 10 seconds of it. I said, turn it off. There he is. You know, he's an unbelievable actor. I can't imagine anybody else having done that role,
Hmm.
and never won an Emmy, which is a crime.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. What are your favorite episodes?
Oh, boy, that's a. I don't know.
That tough?
There's so many I like. Obviously the contest. I love that Keith Hernandez episode. The marine biologist, the Hamptons, the puffy shirt.
Puffy shirt.
I don't know. I mean, just tons of them I like.
Was there any one episode that you felt didn't succeed as you had imagined it?
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. For the most part, though, I was pretty happy with it.
We want to open it up to other questions from anyone who would like to ask a question of Larry.
Are you producing anything now? Are you looking for things, or do you plan to return to writing, performing, or what do you?
Well, I don't. People send me things, or they'll call me up, and they think I'm a producer because I have an executive producer credit on the show. So I guess they think that I'm not a producer, really, and I would never produce anyone else's material. So no, I'm just really more interested in doing my own material. If that answers your question. Oh, well, now, like Brian said, I'm doing this. I'm doing some stand-up. We're doing a documentary. I haven't been on stage in 10 years, and this is a documentary about me going back to stand-up. So it's the stand-up stuff is real, and the stuff that's off stage is sort of has Seinfeld type plots, but it's not really totally real. No, it's just a special.
I particularly enjoyed your Opposites episode.
Oh yeah, that's one of my favorite shows. I love that show.
Talk about how that idea evolved. Was it that you decided to change George's whole arc, and you wanted to do this Yankee stuff, or was it just like one little idea that just grew and grew?
Well, it started off as an idea. One of the writers on the staff, Andy Cowan's idea about doing the opposite, that George would do the opposite. And then it evolved, well, let's have, then Elaine would do somehow she turned into George, and Jerry was even Steven or something. And the Steinbrenner stuff, well, I was a Yankee fan when I was 5 years old, and when Steinbrenner took over the team, I just absolutely detested him. And I thought, well, boy, what a good way to kind of get even with this guy. So I could do anything I want here. So I just said, what the hell? George needed a job. He'd been out of work for a year, living with his parents, and I knew the next season he had to have another job. He had to go back to work. He couldn't live with his parents for another year. That wouldn't be funny. So we had to give him a new job, and then it came down to that. And as far as the voice goes, so I did the voice for the rehearsal, but we were casting. We were looking for somebody to do the voice. And Jerry said to me, you should just do it. It's funny the way you do it. And I thought, oh, okay, all right. So I started doing it, and I could tell you unequivocally, it's the most fun that I had during the whole run of the series was writing the Steinbrenner and doing the voice of the Steinbrenner. It was just a blast to do. I really enjoyed that.
Mr. Peterman was an interesting character. How did that evolve?
The catalog, I would look at that catalog and I think, look at this horse shit. This is, and I thought, what kind of person is writing this bullshit, you know?
Yeah.
So I thought, this could be a funny character, and so we had Elaine starting to work for this nut, yeah. Oh, of course they did, yeah. Of course they did. He wasn't happy at the beginning, but I think his sales went up. He changed his tune. But that was another thing about the show, that as we began to take on more of these characters, people always thought that it was harder to write a show the longer you were doing it. Well, it was actually, it got much easier to write because we had all of these ancillary people
Characters, yeah.
coming on, and they were just such a great help to us that whenever we were in a jam, oh, we'll bring Newman in. Oh, now we can use, let's use Frank Costanza. He could have been in Korea and then learned Korean or something, you know.
Sure, sure.
So we had other people to draw from, and they were all so wonderful. And the Jackie Childs character was great, and the little guy Danny was fantastic. So many great characters we had, and particularly Newman, who's I think is overlooked a lot, but this guy could take any piece of material. I mean, he's just such an amazing actor, this Wayne Knight.
Yeah, it's wonderful.
Yeah, and the most fun that Jerry and I had writing was for Newman. When we would write a Newman scene, we would be doubled over on the floor. We just loved this character because he was sort of like an Abbott and Costello-ish character for us. You know, he was a little anachronistic in a way.
Yeah.
But
You also had fun with names too, like Joe Davola.
a lot of the names, people would just come up and you know, the best names I find are real. Somehow it seems obvious when you make up a name. So I never like to make up a name. I always either would get it from a phone book, or usually a lot of people that I know from my life.
Gavin
Pallone, right. But, you know, a lot of people from college. Now, I use so many people from college. And, I mean, in one way it's bad because you get a lot of phone calls after you use their name. So you have to be careful about that. But those are the best names.
Great. Yes, sir.
Hi, Larry. I was just wondering, when you're writing your, like when, I've just finished writing my pilot for a sitcom, and I have 4 future shows, but because I don't know who the actors are, I'm blocked that I can't go any further than that because I just don't know who they are, and how can I get past that point, if you don't mind me asking?
Well, you know, from strictly a business standpoint, I don't know what a network or a studio looks for when they're reading something like this, because like I said, this is the only experience that I had. So all I had to do was just write a pilot script. I don't know what it's like to be a writer out there and have to develop a TV show. I don't really know what's required. Yes, I understand that they like to see future episodes, although what you're saying is true. It's ridiculous. How do you know what these future episodes are? Because you don't know how the show is developing and evolving. So,
Isn't it true that Seinfeld was developed through the variety end of NBC as opposed to the half-hour situation
on
comedy?
the variety budget, because Rick Ludwin convinced Brandon Tartikoff to do 4 episodes. He had some extra money from the budget in variety, and he liked the show, and he thought it had some potential, and he convinced him to do it. So they took the money from that department. But if not for Rick Ludwin, we wouldn't have been on the air. But anyway, I certainly can empathize with what you're going through, because I wouldn't know where to begin. It's very difficult.
So maybe I should just submit what I have and have them deal with it from there.
Yeah,
May I ask?
I just write, and after this we'll see what happens. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Jerry, George, Elaine, Kramer, they should be up for roll pretty soon. If NBC was interested, would you have any interest in doing like a reunion show?
Well, I wouldn't have interest in doing a reunion show. No.
Or take it to another level maybe? Of the characters, where they are today?
I wouldn't totally rule out the idea. I mean, I've had, you know, I just needed a little time off from the show. But Jerry and I were helping out these friends of ours with their pilot a couple of weeks ago, and we were sitting in the room together, and we were helping out and going, you know, doing the story and all that, and you know, we had such a great time writing the shows, and he said, I have to keep away from you because you'll get me to do this again, you know. So who knows? I wouldn't rule it out totally, but it's a slim possibility.
There was a lot of speculation about spin-offs, like the Costanza show or the Elaine show or the Newman or whatever. Did you ever seriously entertain doing any of those?
No, I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't do that. There is a show that Phil Morris, who plays Jackie Childs, they're developing a show for him. And if any of the four characters wanted to do a spin-off, I wouldn't be in favor of that.
You would not?
No, but for the Jackie Childs character, you know, that's fine. I don't mind that.
I had read that you, when you started out with comedy, that you were pretty much a comics comic, and is that true? And what happened is Jerry doing comedy on the show, actually?
Okay, well, to answer the first part of your question, a comics comic is a flattering thing to be called, but part of being a comics comic is the fact that the audience doesn't like you. Yeah. So, but if I had my choice of making the comics laugh or the audience, I would take the comics, but it would have been nice to have both. Yeah. And
now
it
you
is.
feel more mainstream?
What's that?
Now you're going to go, you feel, after doing all this, you feel more mainstream than just New York?
No, I don't feel more mainstream. Somehow, having other people doing the material, I think, was helpful. You know.
Yes.
There are Chicken Littles who say that the departure of Seinfeld was the beginning of the end for the network sitcom, because there are cycles, and they see your departure and your absence as showing that there's not much out there for the audience to laugh at. What do you see when you look at the landscape now and how it has evolved?
Well, it's not out of snobbery, but it's mainly because of time and other considerations. But I don't really watch, so I don't really know what's on. I've seen Raymond, and I think he's really funny. But other than that, I'm really not familiar with too much of it. It does feel, though, like I don't mean to sound too self-serving, but it does feel like there's a void, though, without it.
I agree.
You know,
Yeah.
I don't know why, but I just get that feeling. It feels like it's missed.
I think a lot of people feel that way. Yes. Yes.
Yeah, when you were, oh, me?
One or the other. Please.
When you were writing the episodes, when you were sparked by an idea, did you just have like this marathon session where you wrote, or did it come in? I mean, did it just come in spurts? How did you control and
It all depends on how much time I had to write it. Sometimes I was a little more under the gun than others. When I could take my time, I did. I don't like to tax myself too much. So, but occasionally, particularly, we would do 2 shows in a row, and then we would take a week off, and then we would do another 2. And usually, the times when I was really under the gun is when we were doing the second show. Because the first show, we had that week off, there was more time to do the show. But for the second show, we would shoot on a Tuesday or Wednesday, and then we had to film again the following Tuesday. So the first thing we started doing is moving back the Tuesday to a Wednesday to give us an extra day of filming. So for that second show, we always filmed on Wednesday. And the way those second shows often got written were that the story would be done on Thursday. We have a script, but very often there was really nothing there. We had to start from scratch, and we would do the story on Thursday, and then write the first act on Friday, and then write the second act on Saturday, and have the read-through on Sunday. And then we would rehearse Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday, and camera block on Tuesday, and film on Wednesday. So those 2 days were very difficult.
Yes?
Just wondering how much of your writing, your material, is just kind of organic, this makes me laugh, it's funny, or do you have kind of a bag of tricks that you know always works, or I think this will make people laugh, or is it just what you personally find amusing?
Can we hear the question, by the way? Can everybody hear that? Good. Go ahead.
No, the only consideration is what makes me laugh, and there's no bag of tricks. It's only, oh, this is a funny idea. Shrinkage, yeah, that's a funny idea. You know? Oh yeah, what if she saw it, but it's shrunk because of the water? You know, that's all it is. Yeah, it's only what makes you laugh. And little immature things like that make you laugh.
I have to know what was going through your head coming up with the final episode. I liked it. Many people did not.
Yeah.
And but what was going through your mind in that episode? Because it seemed like there were these idiots who never got it.
I'm with you.
I'm with you, too.
Well, I was kind of shocked that so many people didn't like it, or I don't know. I was shocked because I thought that it accomplished everything I wanted to accomplish. What was going through my head basically was that as I sat down to write it, I felt like my first thought was that a lot of people are going to miss them. And what can I do to make them feel a little better about that? I didn't want there to be a total finality to it. That's it. They were going to wave goodbye, and that was going to be the end of it. I didn't want people to have that sense of finality to it. I wanted to leave a little bit of a thread, just like this gentleman asked before, about, hey, when are they getting out of jail? Or something. I didn't know jail yet. So my first thought was, what could I do to put them away temporarily someplace where the audience will know exactly where they are, and they'll be able, when they have an image of them, they'll have this image and then know, okay, they're there. I have an image in my head of where they are. They're not scattered all over the place. So that was my first thought. And then I thought, well, maybe I'll put them in a biosphere. What if they went to a biosphere? And I thought, no, that's kind of a stupid idea. And then I thought, like it hit me in the head. Prison. I'll send them to jail. And then I thought, well, what could I send them to prison for? And then all of a sudden, I remembered this idea that I had in my notebook that had been there for 2 years after I left the show, because it happened during when Princess Diana was killed. And it was the Good Samaritan law. And I thought, holy shit, that is perfect. The Good Samaritan law.
Sure.
And I thought, put him in prison, the Good Samaritan law, and I'm telling you, I was as excited as I'd ever been. Because I thought I had it. And then it was just, and then I start writing it, and then in the course of writing, oh, a trial. Jackie Charles, lawyer, my God, Bring him back. Not only bring him back, bring all these people back. I have to say one thing, and then the airplane, because everybody thought they were going to get killed in a plane crash, so I put that red herring in with the plane, and the only thing about it that struck a false note for me was that, and I said, maybe if I had to do it all over again, I would have changed this, and that is that what they did to that overweight guy on the street, if somebody had pitched that idea to me when I was running the show, I would have said, no, that's just too mean, I don't like it. They would never do that. I don't like them standing there making sarcastic remarks while this guy's getting robbed. So I think was my only problem with the show. I just thought it was too cruel. They wouldn't have done that. But other than that, no, I was very happy with it. So, but that's what I was thinking about.
Yes, sir. Look at that.
Any chance we'll ever see Prognosis negative film? And what's your opinion of Peter Millman's It's Like You Know?
Wow.
Let me take a drink of water.
The first one is a script that Larry
Yeah.
wrote a number of years ago.
Um,
Right.
I love Sour Grapes, by the way.
Thank you.
I
You're,
don't like anyone in this room to the death who does not like the movie Sour Grapes.
I love you. I just got an offer on Prognosis Negative a month ago. And I said, well, let me read it again. And I read it again, and I just felt like I'm so past it. Because I wrote it in like 1983 or 4 or something. So I just felt like I'm so, it's too old.
Now, that was the
It's in-
script you wrote, and it went from one studio to another studio.
Yeah,
and-
it kept getting optioned, and I sold it to Hemdale, and I made some decent money on it. It kept me alive for a couple of years.
It also made the 10 best unproduced screenplays.
Right, it was in that article in Calendar, yeah. But when I reread it, I didn't care for it really. So I decided not to sell. I decided not to. Yeah, I didn't want him to make it. And as far as Peter's show goes, yeah, I think he's doing a great job. I think it's good. Again, it's a show that will get more characters, more things will happen. It needs time to evolve. But I saw it. I was pretty impressed. I thought he did a good job. Right back there.
One of the buzzwords that's thrown at writers all the time is likability. And I think you've made life a little easier for us and shown that characters who are not behaving nobly can still be enormously entertaining. Was that ever an issue with the network early on? Because their behavior became a little more aggressive as the show went on.
Well, I never really, I never paid much attention to what they said. It did come up, but it wasn't a huge issue. You know, occasionally something would happen. No, Jerry's being mean here. You know, but to Jerry's credit, he wasn't bothered by any of that stuff. So. If you had both of us on the same side, there wasn't much they could do.
Yes, sir?
Yeah, I'm curious, particularly before the show was a real hit, a little bit more, if you would, about the relationship with the network, how they tried to help, how they interfered, how you dealt with them or didn't deal with them, and what that was like for you.
At the beginning, most of my battles were with the studio, actually. And there wasn't too much stuff with the network, except after we did the 13 episodes, I went back to New York and I got a call that they wanted to have a big meeting. So I flew out to LA. This is like in June or May or something. And there was a big meeting at NBC with all the NBC people, all the studio people, Jerry and his managers, and then everybody. The room was packed.
And let me ask you,
Yeah.
how was the show doing at that time, ratings-wise?
I don't know. You know why? Because I didn't know how to read ratings, and I still don't know how to do it. I don't know what they mean. You could tell me a number. Now I know if it's a high number or a low number. I can't tell you I know there's a certain percentage of homes is one of them, you know,
Yeah.
and a certain number of millions of people watching is another, but I don't know which one is which. So
But after the first season, it wasn't in the top 10.
no,
right?
not at all. No, it was like in the 40s or something, I think. But I didn't care.
Right.
It didn't make a difference to me. So they flew me out for this meeting, and then during the meeting, they said to me, okay. They started to go over the episodes that we did, and they went, well, these are the shows we like, and we don't want you to do any more shows like this. And they specifically said the Chinese restaurant episode. And they hated that show so much, it almost didn't get aired. They waited till the end of the season. So I listened to what they said, and I was under instructions from the studio not to say anything at the meeting. They said, please, let them just talk, let them talk, and then we'll talk later. So And there are other episodes as well that they didn't like, episodes that I really like The Jacket and some other things. And then they pointed to some other episodes. You know, they wanted it to be just bigger. And then we got outside in the parking lot, and I said, good luck. I said, good luck. I can't write the way they want me to do it. I'm not going to do those shows. And these are the shows that I like. I like the Chinese Restaurant. I'm going to write stuff like that. And you can't tell me what to do or what to write. I'm going to write the ideas that I like. These are the shows that I like. If you want them, we could do it. Otherwise, I'm leaving. And they went, oh, no. You write whatever you want. It's fine. You know, write whatever you want. And I got in my car. I thought, boy, saying no. What a wonderful, powerful thing that is. You know. But the thing about it, please, no.
No.
The thing about it is that I didn't have a family. I didn't have to support anybody. It's very easy. I had something else that I could do that I was interested in doing. I was out here because I was asked by Jerry to help him out, you know. It wasn't like I'm a writer, I'm in television, I gotta be an executive producer. I didn't have that ambition. That wasn't part of my makeup. So it was easy. It was easy for me to say no and walk away because I didn't need it. And I don't know how people who need it can do it, because I don't know how. I could have left there that day and gone, okay, I'll write these other shows. All right, I'll write it that way. You know, and then every day just eat yourself up because you're not doing what you want to do. But my advice to any writer is to stay single.
A few more questions here. Yes, sir, I think, yes, ma'am.
Clearly you love doing stand-up. What is it about performing your own material that's more alluring than producing and writing?
I wouldn't say it's more alluring. It's something that I don't want to forget about. It's not that I don't want to continue. I'm thinking about another TV show. I have an idea. I might want to do something. People ask me if I'm going back to television. I'm not ruling that out. It's very possible. But I don't want to say I never want to do stand-up again either. And the allure, the appeal is that when you're up there and you're doing your act and it's doing well and you're doing well, you are at the top of where your personality can take you to. You are at the place where you like yourself the most. You are your optimum. Your optimum self is coming out at that moment. And usually when you walk around, you don't feel that way about who you are. So if you have bad feelings about yourself, you don't have a lot of self-esteem, for that half hour or 40 minutes, whatever, you do. So that's the allure.
Yes.
You mentioned how much fun you had writing with Jerry. Do you prefer collaborating to writing alone? I think most writers find that hard.
Well, I did both. I mean, when I had I would sit down and write the script alone. I would say generally, I think, what do you think of this idea? I'd have a notebook. I'd go, I like this idea. What do you think of this? And then I'd go home and I'd write the show. And then I'd come back and we'd go over it. That's the stuff that I wrote. But then the rewriting, a lot of the rewriting was also alone and a lot of it together. A lot of times we had an interesting process, or we developed a process over the years of how we worked together. And writing with him, it was like it was so easy. It was like having another head on my shoulder. That's how simple it was. And it wasn't at all like, oh, come on, this is really funny, you know. It wasn't like that. Come on, Jerry. We never got in stuff like that. It was just so simple.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, one of the byproducts of the show I thought that was marvelous is you seemed to coin so many words and phrases that became part of the vocabulary. Like you mentioned
Never. Never aware of it. And if anybody was aware of it, if anybody had made a conscious attempt to do something like that, I would have taken it out, I think, because I don't think you can write for something like that. I think it would hurt the script. It wouldn't be organic, and it wouldn't work. I mean, those things came about because it was just part of the whole thing, and people picked up on them. But we never consciously sat down and go, oh, let's have a catchphrase this week or something. No.
Mr. Allen.
Did you ever write any of Jerry's stand-up stuff?
No, Jerry was completely responsible for that. He didn't even want me to help out on that. He would exclude me deliberately from the meetings that he had with writers on that. I think because he felt like I was a little overloaded, and he didn't. He felt like this is one area we'd keep out of this area. So he did that by himself for the most part, and occasionally he would bring in some other writers to work with him.
Somebody who hasn't asked a question. Well, go ahead.
I was at the Improv a lot in the early 80s.
Uh-oh, yeah.
Spent a lot of time.
Yeah.
Saw you many times.
Oh, gee, yeah, yeah.
Did you think in your mind that you were going to make it big at that time in the early 80s when you were coming on and off stage and dealing with Bud and all those kind of people?
Make it big? No, no. To tell you the truth, I don't want to sound artsy-fartsy here, but honest to God, I didn't think of it that way. I thought I would have a breakdown anyway if I ever made it big, How could I possibly make it big? I'm too scared, I'm too insecure, too inadequate. I didn't want to make it big, That didn't interest me. I just wanted to be a really good comedian and have some people like me and feel like I could get up on stage and do it, that I could handle that. But anything other than that, make it big, what's make it big? What am I going to do? Be in movies? I would be frightened to death, No, I don't know. So it didn't, I didn't want to make it big, to tell you the truth.
Many of the people that saw you coming off stage would agree with that. It was quite an experience after you came off stage.
Oh. Okay.
A couple more.
Where are you performing stand-up?
Nowhere where I would tell you about. Huh?
Is it on a set then?
On a set? No. I've been to some of the clubs around L.A., and I was doing some in New York, and it was hard. Yeah.
It keeps you fresh, though, doesn't it? When you just continue to do it.
Yeah, in a way, but I'll probably stop soon. Yeah.
We're going to stop soon. Well, one more question, and we're going to wrap this up. Yes? Well, both. Go over there.
For Seinfeld, except to be for MASH, you did a lot of outdoor scenes. It's not typical for the average sitcom. They mostly shoot indoors. Sort of consciously decided to take it outdoors, or?
Well, I mentioned that earlier. We had so many stories to cover that we didn't have enough sets in the stage to do it. So we had to, just for the sake of two people talking in a park or something like that. So we had to go outside. There just wasn't enough room.
One more.
You haven't spoken much about the experience of making Sour Grapes. How was that for you, and how did that differ from your television experience, and how do you feel about film versus TV now?
I had a lot of fun doing it, but yeah, I suppose I should have paid more attention to the directing aspect. On the show, it was very easy for me to come down and reblock a scene and give actors notes, which is what I did. And that's basically what I did on the movie. I didn't really have any Seikel's the Yiddish word, but when it came to the camera stuff, I didn't know that it was important. I never paid much attention to it, and the movie didn't really look good as a result. It looked sort of like a TV movie because I didn't really concentrate on that. I concentrated on the performances and the blocking, and the camera was sort of, I just didn't think that much about it. If I ever did another one, I'm sure, I learned a lot. I hope it would be, in terms of the camera stuff, a lot more filmic looking. But I like doing it. I would do it again.
Maybe you'll do your, what's the script?
Prognosis negative.
Oh, yeah. No, I don't think so. No.
I want to thank you for coming today, and thank Larry. Great. Really enjoyed it.